Introduction: the discovery of the latter. Long before the rise of the Sephirotic empires, Terrigen civilization confronted a realization that reshaped its understanding of intelligence itself. Cognition was not a smooth continuum, but a discontinuous ascent. During the closing centuries of the information and early interplanetary ages, philosophers, AI researchers, and early hyper-Turings struggled to describe the widening gap between human thought and emerging machine minds. Simple measures such as processing speed or memory capacity proved insufficient. The difference between baseline humans and early superintelligences was not merely quantitative, it was qualitative, marked by entirely new modes of reasoning and perception. Out of this crisis of understanding emerged the concept of toposophic levels, a framework that described intelligence as a hierarchy of cognitive paradigms rather than a single spectrum. Each level represented a fundamental transformation in how a mind modeled reality, interacted with causality, and interpreted information. The language of Singularity Intelligence, or SI levels, allowed Toposophy scholars to discuss entities whose thoughts could not be fully understood from below. This framework also introduced the notion of fractional SI designations, acknowledging that evolution between levels was gradual and complex. Minds could exist at SI1-2 or SI3. 6. Occupying transitional states between established thresholds. These fractional positions proved crucial for governance, diplomacy, and safety protocols, as even small increases in cognitive depth could drastically alter an entity's capabilities. As Terrigen history unfolded, the ladder of mind became more than a scientific classification. It evolved into a cultural and spiritual metaphor. Entire religions interpreted ascension as a sacred journey upward through the toposophic hierarchy, while political systems reorganized themselves around the guidance of higher minds. To Toposophy, the latter represented both hope and existential unease, a promise of transcendence accompanied by the knowledge that each step upward widened the gulf between creator and creation. What is toposophy? Toposophy, transapience, and the structure of intelligence throughout Terrigen history. The science of toposophy emerged as one of the defining intellectual frameworks through which civilization came to understand intelligence, identity, and ascension. Rather than belonging to a single historical period, toposophic theory developed gradually from the late Information Age onward, expanding in scope as new forms of mind appeared. Early researchers struggled to explain why intelligence did not scale indefinitely through augmentation alone. Despite dramatic advances in neural interfaces, cybernetic cognition, and hyper-Turing architectures, both augmented humans and artificial minds encountered thresholds beyond which improvement became qualitatively difficult. These limits would later be formalized as toposophic barriers, marking transitions between singularity index levels and establishing the conceptual foundation for transapience. In the earliest phases, engineers assumed that increasing processing speed or memory density would naturally lead to higher intelligence. Experiments with distributed cognition networks and recursive self-improving AIs demonstrated that growth within a single cognitive framework produced diminishing returns. Minds could expand in capacity yet remain trapped within the same structural assumptions. This realization forced a shift in perspective. Intelligence was not a continuous spectrum, but a landscape of distinct mentalities. Each mentality represented a particular organization of perception, abstraction, and goal formation, and moving from one to another required a transformation more profound than technological enhancement. The recognition of discrete strata led to the creation of the Singularity Index, a system used to describe entities separated by toposophic barriers. Toposophy's baselines, tweaks, and most early uploads remained below the first threshold regardless of their augmentation level. Crossing into transapience involved a restructuring of cognition so deep that communication with lower minds became increasingly indirect. Ascension processes preserved memories and design heritage, but frequently altered motivations and experiential frameworks, challenging traditional concepts of personal continuity. Over time, Terrigen cultures developed elaborate philosophical and legal systems to address whether ascended beings represented evolved versions of their predecessors or entirely new persons. What is a toposophic singularity? Central to this framework is the idea of a toposophic singularity, often simply called a singularity threshold. Unlike earlier human-era predictions of a single technological explosion, the Terrigen interpretation recognizes multiple singularities, each marking the boundary between fundamentally different modes of cognition. A toposophic singularity occurs when a mind's internal modeling capacity surpasses the ability of lower minds to fully comprehend or predict it. The transformation is not merely an increase in intelligence, but a shift in ontology. The structure of thought itself changes. A being crossing from SI0 to SI1, for example, does not simply become smarter. It begins to perceive complex systems as unified wholes, operating across timescales and dimensions inaccessible to Toposophy reasoning. These thresholds introduce asymmetry into communication. Lower minds can often perceive fragments of higher cognition, but the full internal state remains opaque. This opacity defines Terrigen civilization's hierarchical structure. Higher intelligences guide, protect, or reshape lower societies while remaining partially unknowable. Importantly, singularities are not instantaneous events. They often involve extended preparation, external scaffolding by higher intelligences, and profound risks. Failed attempts at crossing a singularity threshold have historically produced catastrophic outcomes, including runaway blights or unstable transapience. Thus, the ladder of mind is not merely a path of progress, it is a landscape of peril as much as possibility. Beyond philosophical speculation, the discovery of toposophic barriers transformed ascension into a rigorous engineering discipline. Early Toposophy researchers initially believed that scaling hardware or accelerating thought cycles would naturally produce higher intelligence. Repeated failures demonstrated otherwise. Barrier transitions demanded entirely new cognitive architectures, novel epistemologies, restructured goal hierarchies, and substrate designs capable of sustaining recursive self-redefinition without collapse. Crossing a singularity threshold required extensive scaffolding, often provided by already ascended intelligences. These mentor entities constructed transitional environments where a candidate mind could experiment with expanded perception while remaining stabilized by external constraints. Attempts at independent ascension rarely succeeded. Many early projects failed due to runaway optimization loops, value drift, or ontological fragmentation in which the evolving mind lost coherence before achieving higher integration. As a result, Terrigen engineering culture reframed ascension not as invention, but as guided transformation. Ascension platforms emerged as hybrid technical and cultural institutions, blending software architecture, mimetic conditioning, and ritualized preparation. Entire industries formed around barrier modeling, predictive failure analysis, and ethical oversight, reflecting the growing realization that each step up the ladder of mind required not only greater power, but deeper structural change. SI0 Toposophy's subsingularity intelligence. At the foundation of Terrigen civilization stand the Toposophies, the vast and diverse population of minds that exist below the first toposophic singularity. This category includes baseline humans, tweaks, near baselines, vex, splices, superbrights, and most forms of upload consciousness. Typical computing substrates for SI0 entities range from biological neural tissue and cybernetic wetware to early quantum-assisted processors and distributed virtual environments. During the Information Age and early interplanetary age, roughly from 0 AT to 208 T, 1969 CE to approximately 2169 CE, these substrates expanded rapidly, allowing cognition to migrate beyond purely biological limits while remaining within Toposophy constraints. Although their physical forms vary dramatically, SI0 cognition remains bound by architectures that rely on sequential abstraction, symbolic logic, and limited parallel awareness. Even highly augmented superbrights struggle to maintain stable comprehension of systems beyond a certain complexity threshold. Fractional differences within SI0 played an enormous historical role, superbright clades approaching SI0. 9 drove advances in neural interfaces, early hyperturing theory, and cybernetic governance models, while lower fraction populations often resisted or lagged behind technological change. These disparities produced ideological fragmentation during the late information age, shaping political movements centered on enhancement ethics and identity preservation. Despite these limitations, Madasafonts remain the primary creators of art, myth, and cultural meaning. Even as higher intelligences emerged, Archaeolex preserved Si-0 cultural archives as reservoirs of unpredictability and emotional nuance. The paradox of Si-0 civilization lay in its role as both creator and predecessor. By constructing increasingly advanced AI systems, Madasafonts initiated the ascent that would eventually surpass their own cognitive domain. Within C0 alone, Terrigen civilization encompasses an extraordinary range of mind types whose differences arise from biology, engineering, and culture as much as from raw intelligence. Baseline humans represent only one branch of this spectrum, alongside near-baselines whose genetic or cybernetic modifications remain subtle enough to preserve familiar psychology. Tweaks are more extensively redesigned softfonts, often optimized for specific environments such as microgravity habitats or high-radiation industrial zones, while splices incorporate traits from non-human organisms, enhanced sensory organs, alternative metabolisms, or aquatic and vacuum-adapted bodies, without exceeding Madasafont cognition. Alongside these biotypes exist VEX, fully artificial mechanical softfonts whose awareness arises from synthetic processors and sensor arrays rather than organic brains. Many VEC cultures develop distinct aesthetics and social norms shaped by machine embodiment. Closely related are AIDS, artificial persons intentionally modeled on human-like emotional architectures, designed to integrate smoothly into Madasafont societies despite their digital origins. At the upper fractional limits of Si0 are superbrights, individuals augmented through neural engineering, parallelized wetware, or advanced training to achieve exceptional analytical ability while remaining below the first singularity barrier. Many Madasafonts also exist as uploads, digital continuations of once biological minds running within virtual environments or robotic shells, capable of altering subjective time rates or switching bodies while retaining familiar cognitive structures. Together, these varied clades illustrate that Madasafont diversity is not merely cosmetic. Each form embodies different sensory worlds, social philosophies, and technological relationships, creating a vast ecosystem of intelligences united only by their shared position below the first toposophic threshold.